All right, out of focus, the death toll from a tsunami triggered by a 7.5 magnitude earthquake has now doubled to 832 in Indonesia. Officials say that the evacuation process faced many obstacles and that the death toll is feared to escalate further. The damage has been humongous in the coastal city of Palu, which has registered close to 821 deaths so far. The bodies are now being buried in mass graves. Indonesia's geophysics agency has confirmed that Friday's earthquake triggered a tsunami. The statement came after a video emerged online of a huge tsunami hitting a town in. People are feared to be trapped in the debris. Here's an account from one of the survivors.
Sudah habis belanja di kasir. Tiga, langsung goyang. Pokoknya langsung gelap, langsung jatuh semua itu. Iya, turun di eskalator yang sudah jalan lagi. Sama anak-anak.
Anak-anaknya Bu selamat.
Iya, selamat.
The Indonesian army is carrying out rescue work in a disaster-hit region. The military cargo plane has rescued over 200 people from the coastal city of Palu. The Indonesian president has left for the quake city, where he would be visiting evacuation centers. The first quake, which was measured at a magnitude of a strong 7.5 off the coast of the island of Sulawesi, was followed by at least 10 aftershocks. All right, for more on this, I'm joined by Max Walden, who's a senior journalist joining us from Jakarta. Thank you so much, Mr. Walden, for speaking to Wion. Terrible news coming in. The death toll has doubled to 832. Could you please tell us more about the scale of destruction and the regions that have been affected by this earthquake and tsunami?
Sure. So, as was mentioned, the Disaster Management Agency earlier today provided an update, and as expected, as the search and rescue efforts continue, the death toll unfortunately has risen and is expected to rise even further. This figure is from Palu. However, another town called Donggala, which has a population of about 300,000 people and is much closer to the epicenter of the initial earthquake, there's been very little, if any, aid able to access there. And there's no comprehensive reports out of Donggala where there's expected to be even more severe devastation. A little bit of good news is that the local airport in Palu has been reopened after damage was done to the runway there. However, there's still severe lack of supplies, food, water, medical supplies are in dire need. And there's been reports of looting. So apparently hundreds of people in need of basic items, food, water, have taken to looting local supermarkets and mini markets. So certainly it's a very dire situation.
Right, Mr. Walden, what are the officials saying about the forecast now? The officials are saying that the death toll may mount further, but as far as the forecast is concerned, is the region still feeling aftershocks? What is the weather agency saying?
Well, there were aftershocks until yesterday afternoon. I haven't heard any reports of further aftershocks subsequent to that. However, officials are still urging residents not to return to their homes. So majority of people there are still sleeping out in the open for fear of course, further aftershocks and buildings collapsing onto people, which of course is what causes these deaths.
Right, and is there any update on the tourists? Because we believe that a lot of people travel at this time. So any details on that front? How is the government handling that aspect?
Yeah, the government did say today that there was around 60 people in Palu that are foreigners. There was a number of people evacuated back to Jakarta. However, they did mention that there are several people, nationals of France, South Korea and Malaysia who are still missing. So obviously the embassies of these countries will be watching very closely and desperate to hear some news about their citizens.
Right. Mr. Walton, initially there were reports coming in that warning signs were ignored by the authorities. When the earthquake first hit Indonesia, the tsunami warning was set off, but it was withdrawn immediately. So there are reports in the media that the officials are facing the flak because they withdrew the warning way too early, which could have, had that not been done, that could have averted the scale of destruction.
Yes, the meteorology agency has certainly come in for quite a lot of criticism, as you mentioned, because of the withdrawal of this tsunami warning around half an hour after it was initially issued. It's unclear to what extent this would have meant that people weren't prepared for the tsunami. However, one fact that's emerged is that actually the monitoring system that saw the cancellation of this tsunami warning was around 300 kilometres away from Palu. So certainly it wouldn't have provided a very good indication of the risk. So certainly I think the meteorological agency has a lot to answer for. And at least one parliamentarian whose family is in central Sulawesi has provided some very public criticism. So they do have some questions to answer.
Right. Mr. Walden, could you please throw some light on the kind of challenges that the rescue and relief teams are facing? And has the government sought any help from the international community? Any details on that front?
Well, certainly in terms of communications and electricity, still very limited there. Those reporters that I've spoken to on the ground have said that, it's very difficult even to kind of post to social media. So certainly communications is a huge challenge there. It's a relatively, it's not a central part of Indonesia, so certainly infrastructure would not be as developed in the first place. However, after this disaster, certainly communications and a lack of electricity will be frustrating these efforts. But the military is there on the ground. They've established a field hospital. And as was mentioned, the president, will be flying in. So the authorities are certainly taking this very seriously. However, being the kind of archipelagic state that Indonesia is, these kinds of natural disasters can pose certainly huge challenges for authorities. There are organizations like the International Red Cross, Save the Children, who are preparing, if not already deployed, teams to the affected area. So certainly there are international organizations cooperating with Indonesian authorities on the ground.
Right. Mr. Walden, another crucial question is, because we were going through a lot of reports that are emerging out of Indonesia, is that because the death toll has mounted to 832, now bodies are now being buried in mass graves. Any details on that front now?
Well, yeah, I mean, certainly as the search and rescue efforts continue, sadly, of course, these numbers will increase. We saw that recently with the Lombok earthquake, and this seems, with the accompanying tsunami, seems to have been significantly more devastating. Certainly, authorities will be struggling to continue. We've seen in some cases trying to dig out of the rubble by hand. There's not even heavy machinery available. And yes, as was mentioned, sadly, because of the dire state of infrastructure and lack of resources there have been people buried in mass graves. I think at this time, there is a lot of miscommunication, particularly given damaged sort of electricity and communications infrastructure. But yeah, there certainly are reports of mass graves being dug. So this is a very difficult time for the people of Sulawesi and Indonesia.
All right. Thank you so much, Mr. Warren, for speaking to Wion and giving us your valuable time. So terrible news coming in from Indonesia. 832 people have died in that powerful 7.5 magnitude earthquake that further triggered a tsunami. The death toll is mounting, and officials are saying that this number could go further up, and we are waiting for more details. There are a lot of challenges that the rescue teams are facing there. Since the death toll is mounting, there are mass graves that are being dug to bury people. Electricity is a problem. The main water pipe has been severely damaged in the area of Palu and other areas that have been affected, and a lot of tourists are also stranded in that area. The military is there on the ground to oversee rescue and relief operations.